Hey, what's going on, True Blazer fans? It's Tori, and I'm back with another Monday mailbag. Now, before we jump into this mailbag, the videos that I post here on True Blazer Fan, still getting around 800, 900, 2,000 views or so. My new Blazers channel, Blazers Uprise, still only has around 500 subs. The support has been great so far, but there's still people watching these videos that haven't subscribed to me over on that channel. So please make sure you go subscribe. This week we're doing draft profiles, and if you're not in the loop at all, I'm still keeping the community content going here on True Blazer Fan. So the Pulse episodes, the Monday mailbags, as well as videos talking about your off-season ideas. Also, if you haven't done so already, go to the community tab, because a couple days ago I posted a rough draft of a shirt and hat design that I just came up with the other day, and I was curious if people were interested in buying it if I actually made it a thing. Now, that's not saying it's actually going to happen or anything like that. Take a lot of things to sort out, but you should go to that community tab and click on the polls and vote on whether or not you'd buy the hat or that shirt. So anyway, now that's out of the way, let's jump into your questions from the past week. Nikos Kodakris says, if we try and trade away ET's contract with a first round pick and a second round too, what is the best trades we can get? I believe trading away ET will be the best move of the season. No hate for ET, but $18 million for limited production is awful. Now, it makes no sense to attach a first to trade Evan Turner, because we probably only need to trade away Myers Leonard or Maurice Harkless in order to open up the full mid-level exception. Trading away Evan Turner's contract is going to take more assets to attach with it just to get a team to take it on. And it doesn't really help us accomplish anything that trading a lesser salary for a better player would do. If we traded Myers, we wouldn't have to attach as many assets. Trading away Evan Turner in a salary dump makes no sense, and I made a video about this over on Blazers Uprise if you want to check it out. Now, this is from a couple Monday mailbags ago, and I didn't get to this question, but part 2 of Blair Bartholomew's question here says, I'm coaching an under-17 basketball team here in Australia. What sort of offensive scheme could I run with them that's not too complicated? Keep in mind, Australian ballers are at a completely different level to the US at this age. Just thought I'd ask for your expertise. Keep it up, man. Great videos. And I love this type of question. Basically, you need to have a few different types of plays that accomplish different things and put players of yours in positions where they're most comfortable. Whether that's a three-point shooter and finding some sort of creative set to open up a three-point look, whether that's a low-post guy at the opposite elbow and setting him a back screen for him to face cut down towards the block. Basically, you just want to try your best to get your players in positions of strength. But I think the number one thing I would teach them would be simply how to play off each other while freelancing. So not part of a set play, not part of an offensive system necessarily, just stuff like pass and screen away, knowing when to back cut, knowing how to fill the lanes while running in transition. If it's hard to put in a bunch of sets with a team like that, I would simply have them focus on moving the ball, setting screens for each other, and cutting hard, and just always try and get the offense moving in some sort of way. Along with that, you need to put an emphasis on floor spacing and trying to keep the floor balanced to give the offense enough room for those types of actions. So hopefully that helped you out. I don't know what level of basketball players we're talking about here, but I think that type of advice is applicable to many different levels of play. Tron OG says, should we start Zach Collins instead of Aminu? Also, if we re-sign Rodney Hood, should we start him over Harkless? And if Rodney Hood can play good enough defense, then I think we should start him because his floor spacing is huge. Hopefully we get an upgrade at that position sometime this season. But Rodney Hood, if he's going to start a small forward, probably has to bulk up a little bit, and he has to be good enough defensively to guard some of the best players in the league. I also think we should start Zach Collins instead of Aminu, because I think the third season is when Zach Collins is really going to take a major leap in production, and I think that we can help cultivate that by starting him at power forward. Now, while I go through these questions, I'm also ignoring the draft questions, because we will have a video where I go over some of your draft ideas in the next week. If you have any draft ideas or comments about potential prospects, leave them down in the comment section below, and I might use them in that video. In the video I posted yesterday where I went over your free agency and trade ideas, if you haven't checked it out, you should. But in that video, I said anything you have left over in terms of free agency and trade ideas, I will address in this Monday mailbag, so we're going to hop straight into those. Portland says we should trade for Dwayne Dedmon and draft Rui Hachimura or Matisse Thybulle. Now, Dwayne Dedmon is going to be a free agent, so therefore we can't trade for him. In terms of Rui Hachimura, I fully expect him to go in the lottery, probably between the 10th and 14th picks, so we'd have to trade up to draft him, and I think that's going to be tough. Matisse Thybulle is a little bit more realistic as a defender, but I have questions about his three-point shot. Right now, we need two-way players, not one-way players. Joshua Burke says, Kawhi Leonard isn't in your dream top 5, which was a top 5 list of dream offseason targets for this offseason. And no, he wasn't in my dream top 5 because I think there's zero chance that we land Kawhi Leonard in a sign and trade in free agency. I listed Anthony Davis, and I think there's at least a 1% chance that we are able to land Anthony Davis in trade. And by the sounds of what David Griffin is looking for, it might be a little bit higher than that. Eugene David says, great video like always, Tori. I really like Buddy Hield. What do you think about him and how he would fit if it was possible to acquire him? I don't know his situation, just a thought. And Buddy Hield would essentially have a CJ McCollum-like impact on this offense. He moves a little better without the ball. He doesn't isolate as much, doesn't pound the ball as much. He's a little bit more consistent shooter, a really great three-point shooter. So he wouldn't have the same problems where CJ gets a little bit of tunnel vision and dominates the ball and the ball sticks to him. But also at the same time, he's not one of those guys like CJ that could have a 37-point game 7 just by consistently creating his own shot. Also, he's a big part of the Sacramento Kings' future. De'Aaron Fox and Buddy Hield, I feel like, is the next Dame and CJ type of backcourt, so he's not really gettable in trade. But it isn't a bad idea, because he would definitely help out the team as a third guard behind Dame and CJ. Henry M says, Wes Matthews anyone? He would be cheap, good defender, good locker room guy. And if we are unable to get Rodney Hood, that's not a bad idea. If we're only able to keep the taxpayer mid-level exception, I think Wes Matthews could possibly be had for that amount of money, so I wouldn't mind a Wes Matthews return. His defense isn't quite what it used to be. His offense, outside of his three-point shooting, isn't quite what he used to be, so Blazer fans shouldn't expect him to come in and be the Wes Matthews of old, but he's still a guy that can help a contending team. Rock Solid Gaming says, just get Melo off the couch. Good fit and cheap. Bad fit because this is a guy who dominates the ball, it sticks to his hands, and we need more ball movement. We need more player movement. We don't need another guy that's going to isolate and dominate the ball. He's a terrible defender. We don't need more of that, especially at the forward spots. And he's not a good player anymore at all. He's not an NBA level player. People are saying we should sign him based off name recognition. We shouldn't, though. Randy Gann says, I would like to see if we can swap forwards on Mo and maybe a second rounder or something to get a guy like TJ Warren. He looked really solid before he went down with an injury, putting up around 18 or so points, can hit the 3, plus is the Suns, so they'd probably be willing to let him go and gather some picks for the future. And honestly, I am not a fan of TJ Warren at all. I think he's actually quite overrated because people think this guy's a good defender. All his defensive stats paint him as a poor defender. Everything that Suns fans have said is that he's a poor defender. I don't think this dude is a good defender. I think he's a very bad defender. But then you look beyond that. For his career, he's only a 34% three-point shooter. Now, he did shoot 43% from 3 last season on 4 attempts a game, but you look at the 2 seasons before that, he shot 27% and 22%. So I have major questions about his 43% three-point shooting and whether or not that's sustainable. You look at a guy like Maurice Harkless, who 2 years ago shot 40% from 3, but it wasn't really in line with his career stats, and then last year regressed down to 27%. This dude is also a black hole. He doesn't pass the ball at all. For his career, in 28 minutes per game, he's averaging only 1.1 assists. Last season, he averaged a career-high 1.5 assists in 32 minutes a game. That's very, very bad for a guy who has the ball as much as he does because he shoots 14 shots a game. He's also not able to get to the free throw line at all. He shot less than 3 attempts per game in his 32 minutes. He had above average efficiency last season due to his three-point shooting, but the seasons before that, he was never above average at all. His assist to turnover ratio is an even 1-to-1 throughout his entire career. I just don't see this dude coming into Portland and making the team better at all. To me, he's a guy on a very bad team that's putting up raw scoring numbers that wouldn't do so on a contending team. He doesn't fix any of our flaws. He probably doesn't fix any of our flaws except for having a forward that can shoot, but as I said, that's questionable. And then his defense is a major downgrade compared to Harkless and Aminu. So I'm not a fan of TJ Warren at all. David Johnson Gaming mentions TJ Warren as well as a good 3-and-D player, which I disagree with on the defense part. But he also mentions Josh Richardson, which is a better target than TJ Warren. Richardson would probably play small forward, and Richardson is one of the best perimeter defenders in the league. Might be a top 10 perimeter defender. He can also hit the 3-ball a little bit, shooting 37% for his career, shot 36% last year. He also has some playmaking chops. Last year, he averaged over 4 assists per game, so he could help with the ball movement, especially by playing the small forward position. But he is a bit undersized for small forward. He's only 6'6". Naturally, he's a little bit more of a shooting guard. This isn't a guy who's able to slash all that well. He doesn't finish well inside the arc. He also doesn't get to the line at all in 31 minutes per game for his career. He's only averaging 2 free throw attempts. You combine that with a guy like CJ McCollum, who also doesn't get to the line, and you'd have Portland struggling to get to the free throw line, which I think would be a problem. He would be a guy that could help our team though, but I don't think he's gettable because he's still young. He's only 25 years old, and he's also on a very solid contract, so I don't see him being a guy that we could possibly trade for this summer. Military 64 Verse says, so I stated earlier in the first round that I think if we're gonna go after any big man, my vote is Nerlens Noel. I'm just being realistic when it comes to getting AD. I don't think we can get him because Portland is a small market team, and that makes no sense to me at all because AD is a guy who's going to get traded, and small market teams, big market teams, that doesn't matter. Now, will he re-sign? With us being a small market team, that's a different story. But you look at Oklahoma City, keeping Paul George from the Los Angeles Lakers. You look at Toronto, who I think will be able to keep Kawhi from going to the Los Angeles Clippers or the New York Knicks. I think Portland will make a play for Anthony Davis. Now, Nerlens Noel is probably going to get offered a little bit more than the taxpayer mid-level exception, so I don't see him being a realistic target because we'd have to essentially let all 3 of our big-time free agents go this summer: Curry, Hood, and Cantor. I'd rather have Rodney Hood and Enes Kanter than Nerlens Noel, so I'm not a big fan of pursuing him. Even though he's not a bad player, it's nothing against Nerlens Noel, just our position. He's not a guy that justifies letting all 3 of those guys go. Cuddy201 says, stop with the Blake Griffin trade. He's getting paid more than Dame. Why would we ruin our salary and break up our team and not be able to pay our stars? Explain. I don't understand why we wouldn't be able to pay our stars if we had Blake Griffin on the salary cap, because we're going to have to match salary to trade for Blake Griffin regardless. So next year, it's not going to make much of a difference at all. In 2020, if we re-sign Rodney Hood for the mid-level exception, we're only going to have $10 to $15 million in cap space. What is that going to help us achieve? We're not going to be able to sign a player as good as Blake Griffin with that cap space. We're just looking at a role player with that money. It's probably the same case in 2021 as well, and that's just when you're simply looking at Lillard, McCollum, and Nurkic and how much those guys are getting paid. In 2022, Lillard is going to be making the Supermax. And if we resign McCollum as well, I don't see how we're going to have that much cap space then. So by paying $34, $36, and $38 million all 3 of those years to Blake Griffin, what are we really missing out on? We might miss out on a full mid-level exception and only end up with a taxpayer mid-level exception, but is the difference between being able to shell out $5 million for free agents that much compared to paying out $9 million for free agents? I know it might be the difference between keeping Rodney Hood and getting somebody a little bit worse than him, but if you're talking about being able to acquire a forward that would actually give us a chance at winning a championship, a legitimate chance because I think Blake Griffin would be a great fit, then what are we really missing out on? Not bringing in a guy like Blake Griffin because of his salary makes no sense, because at most we're missing out on $10 to $15 million for free agents. Now, if you wanted to argue his injury history, that argument has a little bit more credit to it, but when you look at the last 4 years and the way Blake Griffin has changed his game to be a little bit more sustainable in the long term, and not jumping as much, not taking as many hits, I think his long-term health is going to be better than the past. And when you look at the past, he's playing in about 70% of his games. And if there's a 70% chance that Blake Griffin would play in the playoffs, I'll take that for sure. But you are arguing his paycheck. And I don't think we're going to be able to get anybody that's close to being as good as Blake Griffin with the money that we'd save from not paying Blake Griffin to be on this team. So anyway, that's all for this Monday Mailbag, Blazer fans. I hope you enjoyed this video. With that, I'm out of here. This has been Tori. I'll see you guys later. Peace out. Go Blazers.